The Hero's Journey, a Mindful Accord podcast, with your host, Rich Decker.
Hello and welcome to the Hero's Journey, a Mindful Accord podcast. Thank you for taking some of your valuable time to listen to this show. Our guest today is Edgar Olivo, who is a business development strategist and training consultant in Phoenix, Arizona. He founded Compass Career and Business Solutions in 2011 to work specifically with local government agencies and organizations that support small business owners and micro enterprises. His programs have reached thousands of business owners in the Phoenix Metropolitan area, and I am one of them. And his efforts have been recognized by the mayor of Phoenix, where in 2013 he received a key to the city for supporting veterans with workforce development. He's currently the board development chairman for the Arizona Humanities and a past board chairman of Create Academy, which is a charter school focused on serving Latino communities with arts and social justice project-based learning. He holds multiple certifications in professional coaching and training and studied business communication and social enterprises at Arizona State University. I've known Edgar for a few years now, and he's become both a friend and a mentor. When you hear his story of where he came from to where he is now and where he's going, you'll be truly inspired. I bring you Edgar Olivo. Edgar, thank you for joining us today on the Hero's Journey podcast. Can you tell me about your childhood and where you came from, your upbringing, and then some principles, for better or worse, that your parents instilled in you?
I was born in Phoenix, Arizona, and I was raised in Chandler, Arizona. And then eventually, in my junior high years, my family ended up in Maricopa, which is a very small town, ranch style kind of living. And then went to high school in Casa Grande, and then started college in Tempe at ASU, and worked my way. Lived in Scottsdale for a very long time. Worked in various of financial type jobs, and then ended up being back in the city. That's important to know because that's kind of like the immigration journey of my family. My parents, my dad actually is the first one who came here. He crossed here on foot with his brothers to find a better life back in those days. We're talking about the late 70s, early 80s. The economy was really bad in Mexico. Very, very bad situation. And out there, I mean, if you didn't have a small business, you were either an alcoholic or a bum or a rancher. And even ranchers were very respected back in those days. But to own a piece of land is very, very rare in the town that my family's lived in. So my dad had to come out and find a better life. And he came out with his brothers who already were in the States. And then eventually he brought my mom, and they came here. And luckily, while they were here, the Reagan administration granted them, legal status so that they can stay. And as a result, they ended up having me here, and then eventually they had 11 children after that. So I'm the oldest of 11 brothers and sisters. The stories that my mom would tell me when they first started their family here in the States in Chandler. This is back when Chandler was a crops and fields and dairy farms, and there's still some remnants of that now. You see Walmarts and freeways, and the small town, the little old town areas are now becoming these 21st century type cities. And every time I drive through Chandler, I don't recognize it anymore. It's completely different. But my mom would tell me stories that they lived in a little tiny trailer that had no AC. One of the windows was popped out, and it was parked right outside of a dairy farm that my dad was hired to clean all of the cows' poop. Like, that's basically his job. His job would be to sweep up all the poop that the tractors weren't able to pick up, and he would get paid $10 a day. And they did that for a good 2 to 3 years. And my mom would tell me stories about how they would go hungry. There were days that they would be so hungry. There was a cactus. In Spanish, there's a thing called nopal. It's edible cactus that you can eat. It's these flat cactuses that you can cut off, and you just basically scrape off the splinters, and then you cut them into little cubes, and you can fry them up with an egg and eat them with tortillas. And it's really delicious, actually. It's really, really good. And it's like the poor man's breakfast. And there was a chicken that would run around the the little trailer. So every now and then my mom would go looking to see where the chicken would lay eggs, and they would take the eggs. And so they would, very humble beginnings, very, very humble beginnings. And, that's kind of where that's in a sense, my identity was formed out of those humble beginnings, because watching my dad hustle so hard just to have food on the table, my mom keeping the house in order and organized and making sure we were going to school and learning, that was kind of her responsibility. I remember there were days when eventually my dad moved on up and got a better job. We moved into a bigger trailer, rather than from a little tiny shack trailer without a window to a bigger trailer. And I'm talking about the first trailer that they moved into is one of those little campers, like a camper. They lived in a camper for a while, and then eventually they moved into a bigger mobile home, and then eventually got a house, and the rest is history. But I remember that during that time, my mom would take us, and there was 4 or 5 of us at the time. We were still little, and she would have us, we would go to the library, and we had these little plastic red wagon that she would take with us, because that little red wagon, we would fill it up with books. We would sit in the wagon as she hauled us into the library, kind of like, Mama Duck with her baby ducklings, working their way into the library. And then we would walk around the library and fill up the wagon with all the books that we wanted to read. And even though she didn't speak a single word of English, I was old enough. At that time, I must have been already in like first, second grade, third grade, around that age, where I was already able to read and I could speak English at that point. And we would sit in a corner at a library, and this is at the Chandler Public Library. I'll never forget it. We would sit in a corner with our little wagon, and my brothers and sisters would be sitting, my brothers and my sister would be sitting around in a circle. And then my mom would just ask us, all right, which book do you guys want to read first? And so we would grab a book, and we would usually pick the one with the most pictures, because that was the easiest one for her to also tell us the story about. But I found myself having to translate a lot during those reading sessions. And even though I was practicing how to read, and even though my brothers were learning how to read, my mom was learning English, and she was learning English from us. She was teaching us how to read, but at the same time, she was learning how to speak English for herself. My father was, he was a laborer. He was someone who I would classify as work using his hands rather than his mind, right? And you can start thinking about the types of jobs that people would follow: those who use their hands or their body more for work, and then those who use their brain more for types of roles. And my dad was always more of a laborer, always more of a hard worker. Didn't mind working outside. He always had a series of construction jobs, working at dairies, cleaning up cow poop. He's always that guy. I always felt like I never wanted to be that, because, you see your dad come home smelling really gross, right? You see your dad coming home exhausted, not wanting to play with you because he's been working all day for $10 a day. You see your dad just miserable, always miserable. And for me, being that I love school and that I ended up becoming the responsible one in the household, I didn't want that life. I didn't want to live the same life as him. And so I remember making a clear choice, and I was reflecting on this the other day. I remember making a clear choice about not wanting to work outside. I remember saying to myself when I was younger, I must have been, 10, 12 years old in that age, thinking to myself, if I'm going to get a job, it's not going to be a job where I'm going to be stinky and I'm going to be dirty, and I remember wanting to understand what that meant now as an adult. What did that mean? Obviously, I know what it means now because I have the business and the life that I want, but it's definitely on the far end of the spectrum of where my dad was. Now, that's not to say that what my dad did or how he worked was a bad thing. Now, as an adult, I can reflect on that and say, yeah, he did his best. He was not someone who made the best choices because he was also the youngest of 10. And I really think it's important to understand birth order and how that affects your personality. My mom's the oldest of 16. My dad is the youngest of 10. I'm the oldest of 11. And in Mexican culture, the youngest, and probably in a lot of cultures, the youngest is the baby. And in the oldest is the responsible. They're like second in command to the parents. Being that my dad was the baby of the family and my mom was the responsible one of the family, you marry those two together, you're going to have someone who's going to be always frustrated by the baby, because my dad never really got to grow out of his emotional intelligence. He never really developed his emotional intelligence. There were moments where I would capture some of his maturity. a moment that I reflected on the other day, and I was telling the story, and I was like, oh man, this is exactly why. And I think it's so important to reflect. It's so important because it connects all the dots. But just to kind of highlight a little bit of his character, he did have a lot of trouble with drugs, and he did surround himself by bad people. He made a lot of bad choices, and which ultimately led him to his death about 11 years ago. But no one in the family hates him for that. No one is mad at him. No one is holding grudges or resentful for any of that stuff, because at the end of the day, we just come to the conclusion that he was just a person who didn't have a mentor, didn't have a parent, didn't have someone who he could look up to, because all of his older siblings had their own life, their own families. They were sick and tired of him, basically. And here we are, the group of kids that he happened to produce, and the family felt like they had to take responsibility over us. And when they did, they always made us feel like we were like the redheaded stepchildren, like these kids. Oh my God, they're those kids again. And so we had to regain this sense of independence. I remember having to make choices with my family, like my brothers and sisters, sitting in circles or having one-on-one meetings with them at my family household when my dad was killed, and having to strategize and talk about what are we going to do? How are we going to, okay, let's talk about funeral arrangements. All right, are we going to call the police? How are we going to do, all this conversation. We created this entire strategic meeting about how we were going to handle that, because deep down inside, I kind of feel like we were expecting something really bad to happen. But at the same time, the same energy was, we hope it doesn't happen. And then it happened. The reaction was very, how should I say, that whole time, I was so disconnected emotionally to everything. It became a process of just checking off the list. Okay, I gotta get his remains. I have to call this person. I have to do this. I have to go pay for this. I have to go do that. I have to go do this. And then when it was done, said, and buried, and all that whole process, it still didn't even hit me. Anyhow, I share all that because even though he wasn't there to teach me maybe these things on how to be an adult and how to be, responsible and how to carry yourself in difficult situations, I had to kind of pick that up on my own. And in a way, that's his gift to me, that I developed on my own, that I grew up on my own, that I developed a sense of independence on my own by watching his mistakes. And I felt like now he's telling me, learn from my mistakes, don't become what I did, don't do what I did, and I feel like that's the relationship I have with him now. I feel like now my relationship with him is, okay, wherever you're at, even though I'm not religious, wherever you're at, you better keep an eye out for me, because I'm moving into a chapter of my life where I have no idea what's going to happen. Everything before that, I had a lot of control over, but now I don't have any. I'm a little worried about where things could go, and not worried in a bad way, just kind of like, all right, I need to trust my instinct more, and I need to be reinforced more. And if you're out there, keep an eye out for me. That's kind of where my relationship is with him now. But I remember a moment, and this is the moment that I wanted to talk about. I remember a moment where I experienced his humanity, I experienced his side when his mother was dying, my grandma. I remember that night she had lived to 90 in her 90s. I don't remember exactly how old she was, but she had diabetes her entire life. My entire family on my dad's side, they all have diabetes, and he had diabetes too. And it would cause mood swings too. So like diabetes, the type he had, it caused mood swings if he wasn't taking care of himself. So we knew sometimes when he would have outbursts, we're like, okay, is that the diabetes talking, or is that the drugs talking, or is that him talking? We didn't know. So we just kind of let him have his moments, But I remember my grandma, she lived up way into her life, and all of the symptoms that diabetics get, where it starts to become, where basically you're about to die, didn't happen until the last year of her life. And I remember, man, she went through the book, exactly every single symptom and exactly how long each symptom would last. She went blind within a year, within months. I mean, she went blind, she went into a coma. We had to feed her through, a tube in her stomach. And then eventually she just died. It was just kind of like in a matter of months. And her hospice care was at one of my aunt's house, which is my dad's older sister, who happened to be the sister that is the most religious of the entire family, who happens to be, it has to be done this way kind of person. Us kids being there was kind of like okay, you have to be here because it's family. So it wasn't like, you guys are here, we love you. It was, all right, you guys sleep over there kind of thing. And I remember the night that we would all take turns to watch her, and the hospice caregiver would be there. And I remember and amongst all the cousins, because you can only imagine how many cousins I have. We would all kind of talk about, I don't want to be there the night that she dies. I don't want to be there. And I remember specifically telling my dad that I'm really tired. I have a test the next day. Can you be the one who goes in there? And he's like, no, I have to work. Why don't you watch her just for a couple hours? If something happens, just wake us up. And I was like, all right, fine. And I did it, kind of like angry, and kind of like a teenager rebelling, like, oh, fine. So I hung out. And I remember talking to the caregiver. My grandma's laying on her bed, and I remember her feet were exposed and her toes were sticking out. And I remember her toes turning blue. And I'm like, that doesn't look normal. So I asked the home caregiver, I said, is that normal? Her toes are turning blue. And she's like, no, I think it's time you better wake everybody up. And at this point, it's like 2-3 o'clock in the morning. And I remember like, this is exactly what I did not want to do. And here I am actually being the one who goes and wakes everybody up. So here I go, waking everybody up. It's a two-story house. It's snoring everywhere because there's at least 50, 60 people in this house. So I'm waking everybody up. So everybody wakes up. And I remember telling everybody, okay, guys, it's time. You got to wake up. It's time. You guys need to wake up. And finally, when they woke up, all of my dad's brothers were around her bed. And my dad was by her, her right-hand side. No, she was laying on, where was he? Yeah, he was on her right side, and her breathing machine was on the right side as well. And so he was standing right next to her head, shoulder side, and I was standing behind him. And the only reason I was standing behind him is because I was trying to grab my hat, and I couldn't grab my hat. By the time everybody had gotten in there, I couldn't get out. And so I was kind of like stuck there, and I wish I had a better story to tell, but this is exactly what went down. And so I was standing behind him, so I was kind of trapped in between all these uncles. They're all wailing and crying and wishing her to just go into the light, basically, right? And I remember me not being able to go anywhere because the room was so full that the home caregiver told my dad that whenever he's ready to turn it off. I knew what that meant, and I knew that being my dad was the baby of the family. My grandma, man, she spoiled him rotten. I mean, she was the joy in her eyes, and he was. And I remember the home caregiver telling my dad that, and my dad just paralyzed. He just froze. He didn't know what to do. And because she was already breathing so far apart, that it was pretty much time to just turn it off. And so I remember at that moment when I heard that, it was kind of like they told me to do that to my mom, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't know if I could do that. So what I did is I just grabbed my dad's shoulder. I said, Dad, it's okay, go ahead. When I grabbed the back of his shoulder, like I touched him, he went and he turned off the machine. I just remember he turned around and just gave me this big hug and was crying on my shoulder. I didn't cry. I don't know why I didn't cry. I just kind of felt like I was his dad at that moment. Like I was his parent consoling him at that moment. And that's the only way I can describe it. I wish I could say, yeah, I was there and I'm encouraging my dad. No, I just grabbed his shoulder and I said, it's all right. You can do this. And he did it. He turned off the machine. And I remember I looked at my grandma because after he did that, he didn't hug me right away. We stared at my grandma for a couple of more minutes. And I remember once the machine stopped, because it made this crazy noise, like shh, 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 it makes that sound. So all of a sudden it went really silent, and all you could hear was my uncles singing these religious songs that are like, kind of like church music to kind of sing her up to heaven, I guess. I remember she kind of just stopped breathing, and it was like such a peaceful moment that it made me want, like, I remember thinking at that moment, I'm like, man, if I died, like, I want it to be like this, surrounded by everyone who loves you, and then just taking just like a last breath, and it was just kind of like a relief, for her. But at the same time, I remember ER was very popular at the time, and there was a clock right above her bed. And I remember looking at the clock on my right time of death, 3:45 a.m. I remember thinking that's so dumb. And then right after she took her last breath, that's when he hugged me, and that moment happened. And that was a moment that I completely had forgotten about up until just a couple weeks ago, when I was thinking about how I was watching a movie about, women who were grieving their children and stuff like that. I was thinking, I'm like, man, I grieve really strangely. Like it takes me a long time to get emotional about something, because I stonewall situations situations. Like I become, stoic, like you won't see me cry kind of thing. And I made it a point too at my dad's funeral to that no one was going to watch me cry. And of course I have my moments, and in private, I have a totally different situation. I even talked to a therapist for a good year and a half, which was the best decision I've ever made in my entire life. And I highly recommend anybody who is going through emotional challenges to have someone to talk to, especially a professional who can put things into perspective and make you think that you're not crazy. It's that someone professional that will tell you, you're normal. It's okay. This is your way of processing things. Just realize that and this is the advice that she gave me. She goes, just don't ever make permanent decisions on temporary emotions. I will never forget that. Being the oldest, I took on a lot of responsibility for the family because my parents were also very young. They're very young to when they started their family. They were very young in those times. My dad was 18, 19 years old, and my mom was 18, 19 years old when they got married. And then they had me when they were at 19, 20 years old. And so life is just getting started at that age. You're not, at least in my opinion, you shouldn't be thinking about starting a family at that age. You should be thinking about, what are you going to do with your life? What do you want? How do you want to help the world? Who are you as a person, right? That's kind of the time that you have to figure that out. And so through his humble beginnings, even just looking back at their lineage, my dad was the youngest of 10. My grandfather was an alcoholic. My grandmother was the religious follower. And, there was always conflict amongst them. So my dad saw a lot of pain in his own family. And my mom happened to be the oldest of 16 in her family.
16?
16, yes. This is normal in Mexico.
I understand that. I did not know that was humanly possible.
That's
from one woman?
One woman, one man. The Bible says that you need to procreate. I mean, that's really where the philosophy comes to have so many children. Not only that, when you're really poor, having a lot of children is kind of like your insurance policy. I mean, you hope that one day they'll grow up and work for you so that you can take care of yourself. I mean, it really is kind of a survival strategy to have big families. And you can study history left and right, and it's actually a normal thing that happened, especially during that time, right? We're in different times now. Sure. But that time, that was practically normal. And so, even on my mom's side, she saw a lot of pain. My grandfather also was an alcoholic, and alcoholism was actually a very common thing in that town where we're from, which is Florencia, Zacatecas, which is about a four-hour drive from Guadalajara, which is one of the most famous cities in Mexico, aside from Mexico City. And so the people who lived in that village, I mean, you had a couple of choices. Everybody there is very fair skinned. In fact, there's even a deeper history from the conquistadors when they came to Mexico, and the native folks that lived in Mexico. They mixed races, right, if you may, and whether violently or however it happened, right, there was a mixture of races. And in fact, the town that where my family is from, they are the result of mass genocide that happened in that region in Mexico. And what happened is that a lot of the Spanish soldiers actually started their own town, and most of the people there are very fair-skinned. We're very fair-skinned. And in fact, I consider myself fair-skinned, and my entire family is very fair-skinned. My sister here, you got to meet her. She's very fair-skinned. There was even deeper, I guess when I start tracing back, a lot of the reasons why I love helping people is that, there's still that sense of the brown versus the light, right? My grandma happens to be more on the darker side in skin color, and she told me that one time her father said, in fact, no, wait, what was it? No, her father happened to be native, and he married a lighter skinned girl. They had children, my mom's uncles and aunts. That family was somehow not cursed, but they kept saying sangre manchada. What that means is stained blood, because two races were mixed together. And so I come from a family of stained blood, if you may, right? That's kind of how I was taught that, that mixing blood is not a good thing. And I hated that. I hated that my grandma had this little tone of racism, and I absolutely hated it. And I didn't understand what it was. I remember, and I'm just kind of jumping around a little bit, but it all kind of connects. When my family came here, they came here not knowing anything. They came here not knowing any of the norms, any of the culture, nothing. They just heard about the American dream on television, on radio, or wherever they heard it, and let's go chase that, because that's better than where we're at.
And then, of course, they helped my entire family get here through one mean or another. And then I started learning about our cultural norms of what they escaped and what they're starting to implement here. And so I remember my grandmother got really mad one time when she bought a house in Chandler, and next thing you know, a Baptist church was built right next door. And even though she's a darker skin and she has literally zero right to say anything about any other race, she would like throw fits because they would praise too loud. Because she also felt that Catholic was the way to go, and that's the way to go, and that's the way it is, and that's the way it is. And I remember when you start going to school and you start meeting other children, you start learning that there are other religions and that there are other skin colors and that there are other people out there that speak the same language but don't look like me, or speak other languages that don't look like me. You start realizing that she's got an old way of thinking. Like, that's not okay, and I don't want that to come to me, and I don't want that to ever pass on to me. We've had a lot of discussions in the family. There was a lot of heated, passionate discussions about that. And so, when you start thinking about all the climate that we're in today, that's why I talk a lot about really helping people that don't have a voice. And I feel like people who don't have a voice, or people who maybe don't speak a language, it's really the only barrier that stops us to access to information is the language it's being presented in. But anyhow, that's really kind of like really digging deep into the roots of where Compass CBS now today is the only bilingual training center, in fact, in the whole country, which I just found out. We went to Miami. I met all the chamber presidents of all the Hispanic chambers in the country, and every single one of them said to me that nothing like this exists. And so I remember being 9-10 years old and having to connect the electricity for any house that we moved into. I remember having to be going with my mom and my dad to the bank to get their checks cashed or to open a business account. I remember being 9-10 years old and answering the phone. Is your mom there? Is your dad there? No, yeah, here they are. No. What do they say? And then here I am now translating for them, going back and forth. And I have zero sense of what the heck I'm talking about in the first place. I mean, other than just learning how to read in the first place. And now I have to translate this entire world that I have not yet to experience. I was kind of thrown into that world. So it comes natural for me to work with folks who are, looking to get any kind of business service. If you want to just register your business, I think it's one of those things that I can just help you just register it. And it actually saves me time just doing it for you than to actually explain to you how to do it yourself, because of that experience that I had with my parents, that it was just easier to just do it myself than to actually explain what was going on and just do it. And I think that's where the natural consultant in me was born, to just help people get it done, right? That's really just to help people get it done.
So you were the oldest of 11.
Oldest of 11. And then the teaching side, what I do, was born out of big responsibilities that fell on my shoulders. And in fact, I'll share a little another side of this story where I realized, this is where I realized, I didn't, connecting the dots. I did mock interviews for the Boys and Girls Club for the school, for the boy and girl of the year. I don't know if you're familiar with that. They give a scholarship awards to Boys and Girls Club kids, and it's a major competition. They compete locally and then regionally and then nationally, and then they win this big scholarship. Do mock interviews, and they bring in professionals who ask questions to the kids, and ask them, hey, why do you think you deserve this? Or tell me a little bit about your dreams and where are you trying to get with this, and all that, blah, blah, blah. And I remember that all of the young girls were all minority, kids, Latino primarily, Latino backgrounds, Hispanic background. And all the little girls were saying, that they want to achieve these high aspirations and careers. And then they would say, and then eventually start a family. So all of them had that. And then all the little boys that came through, they're all 13, 14 years old. Every single one of them said that I'm doing this. I'm going to college so I can help support my family. I'm going to college because I need to help my mom. I'm tired of seeing her struggle. I'm going to go to college because I want to help my little brothers. Like, that was what the boys were saying. And I remember fighting back the tears, because I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I thought I was the only one. That literally, this is just 4 years ago. I literally thought I was the only one who went through the crap that I went through. And I call it crap because not every day it was the best, right? And you hear children, one after the other, telling you this exact same thing that you went through. It makes you start to wonder, oh my gosh, is this cultural? Is there something that needs to be fixed? Because why should children or little boys at that age already have the burden of having to take care of the family in situations where the father, you normally would think, would be the one who would take on that burden, and the father is then absent? even though I have a big family, my father was absent in my life. He was very, very absent. And in fact, I've had more disappointments with my relationship with him than good things. And it took me a long time to embrace the good because it was so far down the list that it was really hard to figure out. That's why I started off mentioning that he was the life of the party. He was the gregarious one. And the only reason why I've embraced that is because I watched some family videos where I watched him do that. And I'm like, well, that makes sense. That's why I'm like that in my groups. That's why I do those things, because I watched him do it. And I remember watching people be so happy around him that when he died, a lot of people missed him, but he also had a long list of things that weren't the nicest things that he has done in life, just like everybody else, right? I take them more personal because that's my father, right? That's your father. Obviously you take on more personal because I always felt like I needed to fix it. Like I needed to be the one who fixes it. I'm the one who needs to take care of it. Because they don't know what they're doing. I almost felt like I was raising my parents. And so what I used to do is all the kids would come home from school. My brothers and sisters would come home from school, and the first thing that they would need is food. They were hungry, because you come home from all day of learning, and you're on the school bus, 45-minute school ride, because we lived in Maricopa. In fact, I grew up in Chandler, but then my parents bought property in Maricopa, and then over there, that's a whole different beast. Once you move to like a ranch, it takes you like a full day to get groceries. Now you're totally secluded from society, so you don't get to see anything. Your world becomes where you live, and that's it. If you wanted to visit your best friend, it took you like 15-minute bike ride to go see your best friend. I never liked that. So that's why I moved back to the city when I went to college and I came back and I had my business here in downtown Phoenix. I always wanted to be the downtown city person. My brothers and sisters would come home from school hungry, so I would make sure food was ready to go. And then I had an agenda. All right, everyone has homework. Let's sit them down. So I would grab them, take them into the laundry room. And we had a couple of washing machines because you can imagine how much laundry my mom had to do for 11 kids. And so rather than laundry baskets, we had these giant trash bins where each trash bin had a label as to what color of what clothes needs to go where, right? What I would do is I would grab the laundry lid and lift it up like a whiteboard, and I would borrow some markers from my teacher and use that as a whiteboard to help each and every single one of them do their homework. And to them, we were playing school. But really, I was just helping them get their homework so that they can go take a shower, go to bed, or go play or get recess or whatever it is that they needed. But I just wanted to make sure that they got their homework done before they did anything else. And so that was kind of my way of giving them a sense of responsibility that the parentals weren't giving to them, right?
Where was your dad?
So my dad, he was an entrepreneur. He was an entrepreneur. He was never good at being an employee, and he always had a leadership capacity. He had that in him. He knew how to organize teams. He knew how to get things done when he was in the right mind. When he was in his element, man, nothing could stop him. Nothing. And not even his own kids would stop him to get whatever he wanted. Because I remember going to these construction sites. So my dad had a series of different jobs. It was always either, dairy farm related or construction related, and that's kind of where he kind of gravitated because that's where his skill set, more of a laborer. So my dad was never really good at being the worker. He was always good at being either the supervisor or the manager. But, when you work in environments where there are other folks who are also maybe I would say lack of education, lack of parental upbringing, lack of, just circumstantial things that make you a better person, right? Lack of love, if you may, you're not going to make the best choices. You're not going to be, and I would never say publicly that he was a bad person. I would never say that. I would say that he was just a very lost person, very lost. Someone that I wish would be sitting in my classes, someone that I wish would be taking my courses, someone that I wish I could be like, let's get it done. This is the way we're going to do it. You wish that. And so I pass that desire on to my students now. I feel like I want to see you succeed because I wish I had been able to do that for my dad.
Did you see your dad in your classrooms, in your audiences?
Yes, all the time.
Oh, you do?
Oh, all the time. In fact,
so it's a big driving force for you.
Yeah,
that lack of relationship, perhaps?
You can call it that. I have my relationship with him now. Now in my own way, you find a way to rebuild that relationship, whether it's imaginary, whether it's spiritual, whatever you want to call it. But I think my version of him in my head has changed. I think my version of him has now moved towards, rather than resentment, because I don't like living through resentment. And in fact, it took me about 5 years to grieve after his passing, because I was very angry. I mean, I went through, you go through the 5 steps of grievance. I was in the first step for a very long time. Right. And it wasn't until I met Paul that I finally released the last 4 steps, or whatever, how many steps there is of grievance, where I finally just kind of accepted it. And we can go into a whole detail in that, but to answer your question, it's yes, I've reshaped my relationship with him. So I feel like I have a relationship with him now. And I feel like the way I turn that relationship in my head physical is by helping the people that are here, because they come from very similar backgrounds. They come from very similar difficult circumstances. There are a lot of people out there who are trying to take advantage of people, and I'm trying to just say, get away. These people need help, and they're willing to invest in their future. And there have been times where in fact, I have one student right now, and I told him this the other day, and I would never say this to any student, but I felt compelled to tell him. I told him, I said, you look just like my dad. I said, you look just like him. And he was like taken aback, because we have a really good relationship with this student of mine, and he's a hard worker. I mean, the way he talks, the way he walks, the way his mustache is, the way everything is, it just reminds me so much of my dad, and it makes me want to help him even more, and I've had instances where we'll have our Monday groups, and I'll hear someone laugh, and I have to like flinch and look around, because I'm like, oh my God, that sounded just like him. So I almost feel like his energy is the positive side of things that I've always, what I've always aspired to always have with my father. I feel like it's around me. And I feel like my own community has taken me in, and they rather than, it's not even a sense of loyalty to a brand. It's more of like, let's make sure he's going to be okay. Like, that's how I feel with every single one of my students. Like, even with you, Rich, I feel like you say, like, I want to make sure he's okay too, and I think that speaks volumes. I mean, I have to recognize that. You have to know that you're doing that. And then when you watch it happen amongst themselves, you start to think like, man, that is ripple effect in your eyes. When I start seeing them literally forming, alliances together and working with each other. I mean, we talk a lot about that. This space is about collaboration, not competition. I think competition is when 2 businesses are trying to get the same client. That's competition. But if 2 businesses are trying to get the similar client, but not the same client, that's collaboration. Yeah. When you're competing towards the same prize, now you're going to collide, and someone's going to win and someone's going to lose. But if you collaborate and say there's enough market for everybody, rather than having 2 landscaping businesses, like let's say if 2 landscaping businesses, one of them has 2 employees, the other one has 2 employees, but if they come together, now there's 4, 5, 6 people working together. Now you're stronger together than you are independent, and now you can go towards big contracts together. Now you can really strategize and really utilize your resources as best as possible. And I feel like my dad had that in him. He always knew how to see through people. And my mom was the same way. My mom is someone who always made sure that there was positivity in the home. She always made sure there was positivity. No matter the darkest of times, she always found a way to turn it around. She always found a way to spin it around. And I feel like that has helped me take care of my brain and the way I look at my failures and the way I look at challenges and the way I look at obstacles. No, there's a way around it. There's always a way to get ahead. And that has helped me propel, because now, I welcome challenges. Bring them, because I know the second I get over it, I've just moved higher. The second I fell forward, and now I've taken on this mentality of, it doesn't have to be perfect when you launch it. Just launch it and make it perfect as you go along. And, that's really, I guess, the driving force, my philosophy, my values, where they come from, that I truly believe in everyone's idea. I truly, truly believe everyone has a story. I truly believe that everyone has a shot. I truly believe that. And it's not me giving people second chances, it's you yourself giving yourself the second chance if you feel that you're stuck. Let me just show you the way. And if it doesn't work out, let's do it another way.
Well, it goes back to, so if this certain people or this group, if they can do it, then why can't you?
Exactly.
The only thing that's stopping you is you.
Yeah,
and that's your biggest obstacle.
That's right. And I get in my way all the time, And I think I have been, as you grow, as your business grows, you should grow as well as far as emotional intelligence is concerned. I mean, I feel that I go through phases where I'm shedding old skin, and I know I'm shedding old skin. And sometimes, I'm very emotional privately. Like if I cry very privately. I let it all out, and then back to the face. And it's not that I fear that people will perceive me as weak. I'd rather just have that moment to myself, because I feel like my transition is my transition, whether it's understanding how it all connects. Like right now, these questions, when you send me these questions, when I told you I'm excited about these questions, because I have literally been pondering this the last couple of weeks. Like, why are people saying que Dios te bendiga? May God bless you so much, when I am so anti-religion. I am like the most anti-Catholic person you'll ever meet, and in fact, any institutionalized religion, I'm so against that. Not against tradition. I do enjoy tradition. I do embrace tradition. But, I just feel like there's a whole different way about going about your spirituality, right? And a lot of my students are very religious, but when they know that the conversation's about business, but then they throw in the "may God bless you" kind of thing, I know why they're saying it, and I don't take offense to it. I receive it. I welcome it, because when my mom would say it to somebody else, she truly meant "may God bless you." And I take that as, okay, this is a way of us, whether that's their way of saying, may the universe bless you, because you are here, you have found you have found a place to go, right? I'm very careful about, making sure I never come off too preachy, like we were kind of talking this morning. I know that being in front of the room as a trainer, that is a special place to be. If your classroom keeps getting bigger, you have a responsibility over your words. You have to be very freaking responsible. I don't share my values, I would say, or the way what is right and what is wrong publicly. I will, just like we had our very lively discussion today, which I love. I love when we have both sides of the fence, because tell me if I'm wrong, right? Tell me if I'm wrong, and I don't ever want to preach. And so that's kind of where it comes from. A lot of stuff where it comes from.
Tell me about the prejudices you have experienced in your life and how that shaped you as well. Because I would imagine there's been a few. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Many still to this day. Well, see, the one that stung the most, the first one was, I was the first one in my family to get my high school diploma. And that was a big deal. I was one of the first ones. I mean, remember, I'm the oldest of 11. My mom's the oldest of 16. So that means I have uncles and aunts that are around my age. My mom was pregnant with her first 2 children at the same time my grandma was pregnant with her last 2 children. So I have uncles.
It's hard to imagine.
I know. I have an aunt, 2 aunts that are about the same age. We were born like around the same time. So we were about the same age. And then I have an uncle that's younger than me who's the same age as my brother. A lot of my older family members, they didn't get a chance to get their high school diploma, or some that did, maybe dropped out, or some that did, got it, but, one out of all of them, right?
But they in the United States?
Here in the United States. Yeah, here. No, here.
Okay.
Yeah. And so when I got my high school diploma, I had all these colleges after me. I mean, I graduated at the top of my class, very smart. I graduated in 3 years from high school with a 4.2 GPA. Number one reason, I wanted to get the heck out of my house, because, when you're growing up and you're the oldest and you start reaching a certain age, about 17, 18 years old, you crave independence. You get
no privacy.
Exactly. You get tired of little brothers coming into your bedroom, grabbing your stuff. You get tired of just your room not being the way it was when you left it. You just kind of get tired of that. And that's normal. I think every kid goes through that. But I really made it a fuel. Not only that, because of my, negative experiences with my father, some of the bad stuff that we went through, it was really very painful, because I was dealing with my sexuality. I was dealing with my purpose. I was dealing with all these things that I wanted to do. And I just felt like it was not helping the environment that I was in. I just felt like it was just even worse. So I felt like I needed to get out. And so high school was one of the first. Education was my way out. That was my ticket out of my own family unit.
Did you know that consciously?
Yes. I had a calendar in my bedroom.
Decision.
Yes.
Okay.
I had a calendar in my bedroom where I would literally mark X's. And I remember seeing this on TV. And then I had the day circled on the day I was moving out. Yeah. And just to highlight the significance of that. Because I knew what I wanted. And I remember that was one of the first times that I accomplished what I had set my mind to do. That was one of the first times that I can now realize, oh man, I did everything. I don't care if I've slept 1 hour, 2 hours at night studying to pass, to literally I would test out of classes so I didn't have to take the class, so I can save myself the year of high school so I can get out. Took college courses in the meantime so that I can get ahead in college, so that I can get that done faster too. I mean, I was like on this accelerated track, and no one told me to get on the accelerated track. I remember being in a classroom and I heard this girl talking about, I'm going to graduate in 3 years. I remember her saying that, and I'm like, how are you doing that? You know, and I know she's doing it for totally different reasons than what I am. But I asked her, she's like, oh, just talk to your counselor. And I beeline to the counselor. I want to graduate in 3 years. How do I get it done? And then they gave me a checklist of what I need to do. Did everything, got done in 3 years. But the day came that I needed to move out. And my dad had a history of being around the wrong people at the wrong place at the wrong time. He experimented with drugs, and drugs got a hold of him. And it was heartbreaking more than anything to see him go through that, because you know that when drugs take a hold of your brain, you chemically change. You chemically just change, and you can't fix it, you know? Mm-hmm. And so when you lose that person due to a chemical or to some jerk who gave him this crap, you know, and now he can't stop it, it just makes you compassionate. It just makes you sad, you know, and then it makes you mad what he does as a result of being under the influence or whatever, right? So there's like a whole plethora of emotions that happen around people who are under substance abuse, and it really makes you very compassionate. When I hear other families going through family members with substance abuse, it just tears my heart, because I get it. I know how painful that is to be around someone that you supposedly is your protector, but now they're becoming your destroyer, you know, and that's a very scary place to be. There were days where I would hear like things banging on the wall, and then when I would walk out of my room, there would be a giant hole because my dad threw something at nothing. You know, and I'm like, what did you do? There was something on the wall. What are you talking about? You know, and that scares you because you're a kid and you're like, oh my gosh, was there something there? And not only that, you're growing up Catholic, so you think the devil exists, you know, and that there's these demons and saints. And so now you think that your house is haunted, you know? And so like,
no wonder you want to get out.
Yes. So tell me, does that kid need to get out? Yes, that kid needs to get out. Right. And so I got out. I did it myself. And so, but the day that I got out, you know, there's this thing in our family where the firstborn who moves out of the house, it's a very emotional process for any family, right? Because it's the first little birdie leaving the nest, right? And you have a image of how that's going to play out. You know, your family's going to help you move the boxes out, and you know, oh, do you remember this? Here, little brother, I'm going to give you my stereo. You know, hey, little sister, I'm going to give you my little M&M holder container that I had. You know, you start kind of giving little things away, kind of like you're saying your final goodbyes. I'm never coming back. Peace. I'm seeing you, you know. But what ended up happening was my siblings didn't even wait for me to give them anything. They just came in there and just started claiming things. They were fighting over who was going to take over my bedroom. So I'm like, hey, I haven't even left yet, and you guys are already arguing over the stuff that I'm going to leave behind. You know what? Screw you, you know. So then I started packing my own stuff, and I just kind of left everything there. But as I'm moving stuff out, my dad, even though, and I know when he said this to me, he was in a lot of pain when he said it. He said it out of being angry. I know he didn't say it to be mean, but he said it. He goes, because I didn't ask him for help. You know, I know that was very painful for him. And it was one of his good days. It was one of his good days where he was actually kind of normal, you know. And my mom, of course, the second I unplug the television, the first thing that I unplug, she starts crying and is emotional and whatnot. And I remember I'm like, Mom, it's going to be okay. I'm going to come on the weekends. You know, you start consoling and, you know, remind that I have a set schedule. I don't even have a job yet. Don't worry. I'm going to figure this out. I asked one of my uncles who happens to be gay as well. At that time, we were very close. And in fact, my dad, I was with my uncle on the phone. This is back when you had the landline, you know, and you carried the phone all the way into your room. So you could, if you need to know where the phone was, you just follow the cord, you know. And so you follow the cord into my room, and my uncle and I were having these conversations about, you know, sexuality and him going to places where other men feel this way, and, you know, kind of introducing me to what a gay bar scene is and that kind of stuff. And, you know, and back in this time, you know, being 18, you're an adult, you can smoke, you can gamble. There was a lot of things you can do back then at 18. And so I thought, oh man, like they have an after hour. So like once it's after 2 a.m., 18-year-olds can go in and meet other people. And I was thinking this is like a totally healthy thing, you know, like this is what we do, you know, like, okay, so there are places we can go. I had zero sense of what sexuality was. No one explained it to me. In fact, being homosexual in your family in a Catholic Mexican home is probably the worst thing you could do. Like the worst thing you could do to your family. And so you have to hide that as much as you possibly can. I had a girlfriend. I was engaged. I followed the rules. Our family started lending money to each other. And I mean, it was going to happen. I mean, I was going to be married probably with children by now, you know, and I remember I used the excuse of leaving college early because she was a year behind me, that, I have to go figure it out. We're not going to be seeing each other anymore, so I'm going to have to break up with you. And, we had been together since like junior high, and there was love there, but she also, I said, you have to look at your life, think about what you want to accomplish, just kind of giving her that runaround. And so, we broke it off. And of course, my family was all very sad. And to this day, they still bug me about it. So, do you still talk to Letty? And I'm like,
are you kidding?
No, I don't talk to, yeah. And now she's married with kids and all that other stuff. But long story short is, I moved out, and as I'm carrying the last box out of my house, putting it in my uncle's car, who was the one who basically helped me figure out my sexuality, helped me kind of get set up in the big city, doing this. My dad stops, and he said something to me. You say this to someone when you want to curse them, not like curse like you're stupid or F you or if that. No. This is when you really want to curse somebody with bad luck for the rest of their life. It's in Spanish, there are words that carry a lot heavier weight than in English. For example, the word stupid in Spanish is a really bad word. When you say estúpido, it has such a heavy, like, you use that lightly. You don't use that just freely like we do. Oh, that's stupid. That's in English, it has a different kind of, you can still call someone stupid and mean a lot of things, but the word in Spanish carries its weight, right? And he said to me, and it sucked. It sucked that he said it because I cried all the way to college. But he said, te echo la sal. Tú de aquí no saliste. Tú saliste de aquí corrido. He goes, I'm throwing salt at you. You left this house because I kicked you out, and that's what people are going to know. That's what he said.
No, why would he say that?
Because I didn't ask him for help.
Oh.
Because that was his way of showing, you hurt me. Well, help, like, as the oldest son asking the father to help them move out. And, Dad, can you come help me set up? Hey, Dad, I never asked him, hey, Dad, I broke something. Can you help me fix it? I never went to him to do it, to ask him for any help, because I had to do it myself. I was the oldest. He was never around. So I was the one who had to get real handy around the house. If a chair broke, I had to fix it. If the fridge broke, I had to fix it. If something broke, I had to fix it. And so I was kind of like the dad for a very long time in my family. And so because I didn't ask him on this major life decision for help, he took it very, very personally. He took that very, very hard. And I didn't realize that I was doing that to him. I just thought
you weren't doing anything.
No, I just thought it was business as usual. I mean, literally, it was business as usual for me. And he said that to me, and my mom, I remember screaming, "Don't say that to him. That's your son," and blah, blah, blah. I mean, it became this big, emotional kind of production. When you start kind of reflecting on that, when I drove off the property, and I remember getting to my first stop sign, and my uncle was behind me in his car, and I remember I just stopped, and of course you collapse on your steering when you start crying, because you know how heavy, at least in my culture, I knew what that meant, and that's really bad. And then what that does is you start to believe that. You start to believe that, oh man, when someone throws salt at you, that means that they are throwing bad luck at you. It's like they're wishing the worst on you. And so you start to wonder, well, if your dad did that to you, then that's going to determine the rest of your life. I literally had that crisis moment that up to this point, I had been achieving all these things of getting out of high school, high grades, getting admitted to ASU, the ASU, because that's where I wanted to go, and doing all these things, even almost going into the Air Force. I remember taking the test and I was up to the point where we were going to get sent to boot camp. I was ready to sign the official paper, and I asked my parents to sign off on it. And my mom said, no, just hold off on that. Think about it a little bit longer. And I'm like, all right, I'll think about it a little longer, because they were literally going to give me free college for as long as I live. At least that's how I felt, right? And this is pre 9/11, pre 9/11. That whole era was totally different after 9/11. Everything changed after that. Just kind of wiped my face and drove to the college campus. I moved into the dormitory. I stayed in the dormitory for maybe about a semester and a half, almost a year. I had to get out because 9/11 then happened around that time. I was living on the 9th floor of a tower, and when 9/11 happened, they evacuated us. It was a very scary time. I mean, I remember being terrified. I just moved out of the house, and now we're in war. Like, oh my God, the world is falling apart, and my dad hates me, and there's all this stuff going on, and I knew that I was going to get on the business track in college. That's what I was going to study, business accounting. That's what I was going to do. Everyone told me, you're going to be an international banker because you speak speak Spanish and you speak English. You get to travel. I had an accounting teacher in high school. I remember, I will always remember her. She was the one who kind of set me on the score. She said, you can put together all these skills that you have. And I told her the laundry, machine, the washing machine story. And she goes, you can be teaching it. And I never listened to it. I just kind of went my own path. And so then I got a job as a bookkeeper at a Walgreens. And then eventually I just followed this financial track of careers that ultimately led me to where I'm at today, where now I can talk about any size business. I can do bookkeeping for any size business. I can talk about leadership because I've had employees, 350 employees, 40 supervisors. I can talk about all these things that my career choices have allowed me to do. And now I can help others establish their own business.
What led you into the gaming field?
The gaming field. Yeah. So back to that uncle. It's kind of sad that we're not close now because we've grown apart. He's moved on in his own side, and I've done my own side. But my uncle was working at a casino, which is one of the casinos that is right by my house. And I never wanted to work in the casino. Everybody that you grow up with around you either works at the casino, has someone that works at the casino. So it was kind of like one of those things that I don't want to do what everybody's doing. So I just wanted to go away. But the summer before I started college, I had I got a part-time job as a bellboy. So I would help people get their luggage, take them to the room, and they'd give you tips, and I'd walk home with $150 in my pocket, and I felt like the richest person in the world. And I'm like, this is perfect. I'm going to save up my money so that when I start college, I've got some money in my account. And you don't realize that when you're on your own, how fast that money disappears, right? And especially if that's your only job. So that's why I got the bookkeeping job at Walgreens and then moved into that direction. But at that age, while you're going to college, you're starving. You need to make money. And you start wondering, well, if this is not paying enough, can I pick up another job? And so then I picked up a night audit job at a hotel. And because I was doing night audit at a hotel, of course, that's more in the financial. And I figured this makes sense. This is the degree that I'm chasing. And then my uncle worked at a company called Avnet, which is it's one of the largest technology distributors in the world. And he used to do inventory control with them. And I used to ask him, hey, just, I would love to work in that company. That seems like I can have a trajectory there. And he never really gave me a leg up. He never gave me a referral, I walked in there and I said, are you guys hiring? And they said, yeah. I said, hey, I've done this, and that. And they said, here, just fill out this application. And within 2 days, I got the job. Everything I've wanted, I've had to walk in and get the job. The Walgreens job, I walked in, and this is back in the days when they asked you, tradition was to walk in and ask if they were hiring. I walked in, I said, is your manager here? Mr. Gary Roden. I will never forget him. And I said, are you hiring? I said, I'm just starting college, and I'm going to be studying bookkeeping and accounting and business. And I said, and how can I help you? And he says, well, we're not really hiring right now, but our bookkeeper could use some help. Can you work night shift? I said, sure, sign me up. And then the next day I got the job. That's literally how it worked. He didn't even check resume. I didn't have a resume, nothing like that. But how I ended up in the casino is, my uncle had moved out of the company, the Avnet company, and then he got a job at the casino. And then we moved together, we lived together, and he would come home and he would show me that in the position that he was working in, he was making anywhere between $900 to $1,500 a day in tips. Working in the casino, working now in the gaming side of things. And anyone that tells you that they're making that like $15,000 a month, yeah, so how can I get in on that, right? And so it took a very long time, and this is a whole nother story, but it took a very long time till I finally took the courage to go apply at the casino, and I got a job in the marketing department. So I was the guy who would make sure all the players were doing fine. And this is around the time that there wasn't any blackjack. The law was 18, so you could gamble when you were 18 years old. Now it's 21. And during that time, there were these two big changes happening in the gaming industry. Number one, they were bringing blackjack into Arizona. The only state in the entire country was Las Vegas to have blackjack, the cards, the physical cards. They had the machines, but not the people. And then 21 was about to change. The law was around that time too. So when blackjack finally came to Arizona, and while I was working there, I had zero clue what gambling was. When you turn 18, the first thing you do is go put $20 in a slot machine, see if you win. That was kind of like tradition. And so that's as far as I knew about gambling and buying scratcher tickets. That's as far as I knew. And so a couple of friends, coworkers, they wanted to go and play blackjack. And so we went and played blackjack. And this is important part of the story. They were playing blackjack and I wasn't playing. I was just watching them. And, I was exchanging the chips for money and just like, what do you guys? Oh yeah, do 21. Yeah, that's how it works. And that was fun. And then the next day I'm logging into my computer and my password's not working. And I jokingly tell a coworker, hey, I think I got fired. And I was working in the marketing department. I think I got fired. And then here come the big bosses right after I said that. And they said, Edgar, can we have a minute with you? And so we go and we go to the back office. And I'm not thinking anything. I'm not thinking I'm going to get fired. I was one of the best employees there. And they said, Edgar, we're kind of going through an interesting time right now. And we caught you on camera playing blackjack. And, unfortunately, you're technically the first person in the entire history of this company that we have to talk to about this. We're trying to figure out what the policy is, and the policy happens to be that no employees can play blackjack. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, I wasn't playing blackjack. I don't even know how to play it. I said I was just helping my friends cash out their chips so that I can watch them play. I said, did you guys get that on camera? They're like, yeah, but the fact that you were exchanging money makes you part of the game. And I'm like, all right, so what happens now? They said, you have two choices. Either you leave on your own or we can terminate you. And I said, you know what? I'm going to leave on my own. That was at the Harrah's Casino. I was kind of like their first employee fired for that particular reason. So I'd like to think about that moment as a moment in history for the state of Arizona. But because I had a gaming license, I was able to apply for a finance position over at Casino Arizona, which is where I ended up working. I had a very long career in the finance department, reconciling all of the hotels, counting down the vault, counting millions of dollars of cash, being in charge of all of the cashiers. There, you're not dealing with just any cashier. You're dealing with $150,000 at a minimum for each till. And so now you're handling large sums of money. And so you become very, very hyper aware and sensitive of detail because you're dealing with 3 levels of government. You're dealing with state, federal, and tribal. And all of them are on your case watching, making sure that you cross every T and you dot every I. So it makes you very aware. And plus, to me, it was already easy because that was just how my career has been the entire time. When you're doing bookkeeping, when you're doing inventory control, when you're doing any of that, so detail is very, very important. So that just kind of naturally became the fit. And while I was going to school, I was doing that. And then fast forward about 4 or 5 years, I was going to, I applied for a training job. I had asked my boss in the finance department, I said, hey, I would love to be the guy who trains everybody because I feel like the new hire orientation, the trainings are not doing a good job and I can train them because all of my employees that I trained wanted to be on my shift. They all wanted to work with me because I knew how to coach them. I knew how to train them. And I was 23 years old, 22, 23 years old, young kid with already this capacity to help a team. So there was an incident that happened where, anyways, long story short, I'm making these stories very long. The position opens up for the training job in the finance department. At the same time, this gaming supervisor job opened up, and the gaming supervisor, literally people die for this job. It is the highest paying job in the entire casino. It requires literally 0 to none experience. All you have to know is how the casino works. Anytime that position opens up, it's like, when you work in corporate environment, that one position everybody covets, right? You have to literally wait until somebody retires or passes away or moves on for that position to open up. And then when that position opens up, it's literally the entire casino applies for that position. And so because I was bilingual, and this is where I feel like being bilingual is what catapulted me to the next level, because up until that point, I never had to use my Spanish. Up until that point, I didn't need it. I just needed my brain for numbers. But at that moment, the position opened up. My assistant director didn't back me up on something that had happened with a customer. So I kind of got mad. I'm like, do I really want to stay here? No, I'm going to apply. So I applied for both positions. I applied for the training supervisor job and I applied for the gaming director job. I got interviews for both, and both interviews happened to be on the same day. And one of them was in the morning and the other one was later in the afternoon. So I had to go to the first interview, sneak my way in, make sure that the other bosses didn't see me, and then go change and then come back for the other interview on the same exact day. And I thought I bombed the interview for both of them. For the training job, I knew what I was talking about. For the gaming job, I had no idea what I was talking about. They were asking me a lot of questions about, do you speak Spanish? Do you understand how the slot machines work? Do you understand this? Do you understand that? I'm like, yeah, I got a sense of it. I understand it because I have to explain to people how it works, blah, blah, blah. And they said, okay, well, we'll give you a call. Well, that night I used to work graveyard shift. And this is why I can relate to people who work shifts because I did it for 5 years. And that was kind of paying your dues when you get this job. I got offered both jobs. My boss at the time, the finance boss, told me, she goes, Edgar, I have good news and bad news. And I said, well, give it to me. What is it? Give me the bad news. Well, the bad news is I know you're going to leave me. I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, and the good news is you got both jobs. And she goes, which one are you going to pick? It's 23 years old. I am presented with an opportunity to either follow what I've been working so hard to do or get a 6-figure job. I took the 6-figure job. And so that was when I walked away from something I had worked. That was the first time I walked away from something for money. Because I had seen the kind of lifestyle that these people that worked in that department have. I had seen that they travel a lot. They had the nicest cars. They had the nicest house. They were always talking about how many tips they get. They always talked about, and I thought, well, I'm not going to do it because I want to be like them. I want the money so I can do stuff for myself. And so right around that same year that I got that job, it was actually one of the biggest milestones. This is before I even graduated from college. To land a 6-figure job like that, and, even before you graduate from college, it's kind of like,
it's almost,
it never happens. Yeah. It never happens. Right. And so add that on top to the portfolio that I'm already building with my family. I'm the first one to get that kind of income. So now all of a sudden they're all looking at me as an opportunity. And my dad, was in and out of jail. I mean, it's a lot of stuff, right? In and out of jail. And then he ended up getting deported. And when he got deported, I felt an obligation to now support him, to now help him. He never asked me for a single dime. He never asked me for a single penny. He never looked at me that way. He never became that for me. I felt like I needed to take care of him. But I also knew that the more I was helping him, the more I was enabling him. And I knew it. I knew it deep down inside. But I almost felt like I needed to all the success that's coming my way, I needed to kind of just, pass it on, kind of get rid of it as fast as possible. And if I can get rid of it to my own family, then even better, right? Because I'm helping them in my mind, when really I'm not making anything better.
You sound like the kids you just heard. Mm-hmm. You just heard it at the Boys and Girls Club.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. That's exactly it. Yeah. My dad in that, when being deported, what do you do? What job do you get? What business do you start? You're living on the border because you want your family to come visit you, because your family's going to come drop off clothing. Your family's going to come drop off furniture so you can set up your house. Because I told them, you're not coming back. No matter how it's going to happen, you're not coming back. I'm not going to risk my family because you want to come back. You made decisions. You're going to stay there, and we're going to make sure that you're taken care of there. And so we had to kind of accept it, right? But I was the voice of logic in the family. I was the voice of reason in my family. And because of that, I was always also the bad guy, going against the grain kind of thing, And so because I had to do a lot of very difficult decisions. In fact, one of the decisions that I had to make ended up causing him to be deported. I had to call the police on him. And now I have zero hesitation when I see injustice happen with anybody that I will stand up. What do you need? I will get you the lawyer. I will find out this. I will find out, because I get so protective, of other people that it's, and I think that's where leadership, people see me as a leader, that I'm no bullshit. Let's just get this done. Right. I'm sorry. Can we cuss on your show?
Of course.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm sorry. What the hell you want?
And this is probably the first time I've cursed publicly. Right. So, anyhow, there's a whole stuff that goes connected with that. And so long story short, when I got the job, it was during the recession, I'm making all this money. I'm traveling more than I ever have in my entire life. I have the nice car. I have the nice apartment. I have everything nice. Never really invested much. I was investing in my 401k very heavily, and I had about $350, I think, was around the amount that was in my 401k. And I'm 26, 27 years old with that kind of money in my 401k, not understanding what retirement is. But you in your back of your mind, man, that's a nice chunk of change. That's a nice chunk of change. I'm putting it away because I was literally putting about $1,000 away every 2 weeks, and it grows. And if the economy is doing great, then your money's going to grow. But then what happens? 2007, 2008. Economy tanks. I lose literally everything in my 401k. I didn't understand the severity of my loss until I had decided that I wanted to quit my job. And when I knew that I could cash out my 401k, and I saw that I went from $350 to $75,000 the day I quit my job, I couldn't believe it. I felt so screwed over. I felt so taken advantage of. And watching people come into the casino, because I was making more money during that time, and I've shared this with a lot of people, that I made more money during that time because my income was directly connected to the amount of money that the casino would make. The more people gambled, the more tips we would make, the more our raises would go up. And during a recession, what I saw was the complete other side of the recession. People gambling their mortgages away, people gambling their baby's milk formula away, leaving the baby in the car, and us having to call the police to go get that baby out of the car because it's 125 degrees outside, and people leaving their animals, and animals dying in the parking lot, people getting shot because they met someone in the casino, they became friends, someone who doesn't know, and then they go to the car together, and then someone gets shot and taken the money. It was constant toxic, like dangerous situation. I would have nightmares where, you would hear people going into like, this is when again, 9/11 happens, right? And then 2007, 2008, you start hearing about random gun shootings in places. I'm like, what protects me? I'm in an environment where money is literally being thrown around all over the place. Who's going to protect me? And then there was something, sorry, I got something in mind. There was a truck, one of the trucks that the casino uses to carry the money. What do you call those? Armored trucks?
Yes.
Got hijacked on my shift. They park in the back, and this car came and hijacked them, and it became this long car chase in the native reservation. It didn't make the news because once it hits the reservation, it doesn't make news. All of us remember the guy that was driving. We knew who the guy was, and we knew he was involved in all this. And then you start looking at customers who start getting really disgruntled, and they've been tipping you really well, and then all of a sudden they're losing everything, and then they're banging and hitting things, and you worry that they're going to go into the car, grab their gun, and then shoot you for your tips. Like, that's the kind of like environment that I was in. And so when I told one of my employees that I felt like coming to work was eating away at my soul, that's the reason why. Because I felt like I am not helping anybody. What am I doing? My family is going through crap. I'm in an environment that is really not conducive. I started drinking more heavily because even during that time, my father then passed away, like about a year after I got the job. So then I was still in the job.
What did you pass from?
He was actually murdered. He was murdered. My father was murdered. Again, wrong place, wrong time, wrong people.
Involving drugs?
Mm-hmm. Involving all that stuff. Yeah, involving all that stuff. And it's just, I had to clean that up. I had to be the one who cleaned that up. And I remember I had to clean that up. And then
first of 11.
Yeah, I had to get his cremation done in Mexico. If you've ever had to do anything like that, it is literally like, if you ever had to do, if you think funeral arrangements are tough here, imagine doing it in a third world country. Where they will give you your father's urn and it's still warm in your hands. When the paperwork is not filled out correctly, or they treat you like crap, where you're looking at remains of a human being that don't even look like your father. It's like really traumatizing kind of stuff, right? And I remember, this is a stupid joke, but this is it makes sense now that I'll say it publicly, is I remember having his urn in my car seat and crossing the border, me showing my ID and all that other stuff. And they said, "What is that?" I said, "Well, these are my father's remains." And I showed the paperwork. And then I remember crossing, and I'm like, "Well, you got your wish. You came back with your papers." You came back with your papers, and that was what came through my mind. And
it's funny.
Yeah, it is. He would laugh now. He would totally laugh. Yeah. But we have him buried here in Chandler, and I haven't visited his grave in a long time because I feel like I don't need to visit his grave to remind me of what happened. I feel like I just need to have him around in the good times.
How have you reconciled all these issues you've had with your father for your entire life, really? Even
tons of therapy. Yes. Tons of therapy. Yeah, I had a lot of therapy. I had a bout of drinking too much, being young, money, Vegas.
If I was your age with my habits, I'd be dead.
I was close to reaching that point. I didn't realize how close I was. It's dangerous. It's a very dangerous lifestyle. And when you're grieving, drinking and all that stuff, drugs and alcohol and smoking, it's bad. It's bad all the way around. And so you can never blame anyone who moves in that direction, because that's the easiest way to go. I was there. I know how easy that was, but I also knew how bad it was for me, and I was watching friends get DUIs left and right, and it almost became a running joke. Who's next? And you start wondering, like, why are we celebrating this? Like, this is awful, like, this is really, really bad. And that's when I had met the person that changed my life. When I met this corporate trainer that came into our company, I remember, I will never forget it. I'm friends with her to this day. In fact, I owe her everything of the direction that my career has gone. Her name is Jennifer Buck, and she has a corporate training company, and she travels all over the world, and her client happens to be the casino that I worked at. And I remember she gave us this team building class or customer service class. I don't remember what it was, but it was some class where, man, she had us there. Everyone complained about going to trainings, but everyone looked forward to going to hers. And I remember a couple of trainings would go by, and I would be so nervous to ask her, or maybe I was hungover to even ask her because I didn't even care, that I finally got the courage to ask her. I'm like, "Jen, I really love what you do. I think this is what I want to do. I figured it out." And I said, "Would you just tell me how to get started? Like, where would you point me? Just point me in the right direction, and I'll figure it out from there." And she said, and I emailed her, in fact. Took her a couple of days. I thought, oh, she's that busy, she will not reply. And I didn't realize just how busy she was until I became that. And I'm like, yeah, no, you get real busy. She sent me this email step by step what certifications to go. Toastmasters was one of them. NSA was /NSA, Toastmaster /NSA. And then she gave me exactly the same answer I gave you earlier, the difference between the two. And she said, take as many certifications as you can, do this, do that, do this, do that, and then you're ready to go. I followed that to the T. I had that paper on the board when I would walk around, inspecting, talking to customers, the high rollers and all this other stuff. And I would look at it and I would look at it and I would look, okay, good, I've done that. And I started setting deadlines. And I had an employee who was from Cambodia, and they do a lot of numerology. In fact, our listeners won't be able to see this, but I carry with me something that he gave me because he was a monk in his country, and he really believes in numerology and really believes in energy, and he believes in what goes wrong comes wrong. I had these really deep talks with him, and he was kind of my therapist in a way too during that tough time. But he gave me two things. The first one I carry with me in my wallet is a little prayer card that I've had now for about 6 years. And he said, carry this with you. I know you don't understand what it says on there, but he goes, it's everything that you're going to need. And he goes, whenever things get tough, things get rough, just remember, you have the entire energy of the universe in your wallet. That's what he said to me. And, I could probably put this in a Google Translate and figure out what it actually says. But I mean, the letters are so small, I don't know what it is. But the intent that he gave it to me, I kept it. And then he gave me this Buddhist monk belt. I don't know if you've seen those. It's like a string with these metal barbs, kind of like wrapped around them, and then they put it around their waist, and that's supposed to draws energy to your core. And my waist is not as small as his, so I have it in my house, and so I touch it every now and then, just to kind of grab that energy, and I've made it kind of like a ritual. Like, don't forget. You have the power of the world in your hands, and it's with you. And so he's the one who actually came up with the date to do our ribbon cutting, 11/11/11, November 11th, 2011. And he started writing down the numbers, and that's the universal number. Do not miss that date. So I quit 2 months before that. No, about a month. Yeah, about 2 months before that. So that 11/11/11 became our official ribbon cutting ceremony. And
Did you feel resentment towards your mother because she didn't protect you from your father?
Yes, for a very long time. Absolutely. I mean, in fact, once he passed away, once all that was said and done, I had a major breakup with my mom. A major breakup, like the kind of breakup you would have like a divorce. It was like that big for me, at least. In fact, I broke up with the entire family. And I remember after we came home from the burial, and it wasn't even a burial. I remember just kind of like telling some of the family members that had given me crap this entire time, my entire life, telling me, I had one uncle that told me, why are you even going to college? You're not even going to finish it. I remember him saying that. And now I'm going to be Dr. Olivo before I'm 40. Like, I'm on a mission. I have a doctorate coach who's going to help me get my doctorate. And I'm like not going to let that voice get me in the way. So there was a lot of those people who came to that funeral that I publicly disowned. I literally on the pew at the top when everybody's, supposedly mourning, I said, and now all of you will now no longer be my family. I remember putting him in a hole, and I had my dad's sisters, older sisters, my aunts, who are hyper religious, were like trying to rub my back, and they never were there for any of it. I mean, they didn't even see any of the bad stuff. In fact, they made it worse because they were so dramatic, overly dramatic over everything. I just wanted to get this done, like check, get it over with so I can move on. I remember looking at them still crying, and I said, well, I guess this is where it all ends. This is where you're no longer my aunt. Oh. And I said it to that. Wow. And I remember I said it to them, and I remember, like, why did I say that? Like, I still mean it to this day. I don't feel like I need them anymore. I really don't. I mean, it's one of those things where you start looking at what areas do you need to clean up. But then I said it to my mom, and that's where I knew I had done something wrong. But at the same time, it felt right at that time. I didn't mean like this is over forever. I need a break from all of you. Because up to that point, I had been fixing everything down to where our father and now where our mother is going to be buried. I mean, I had to fix all of that. And the things that I expected them to already have. But in my family, they just didn't do things right. And that's why I'm so passionate about doing things right. Getting your will in order, getting your family in order, getting all your financials in order, because don't put that on your family. Because that was all put on my family, on me, on my shoulders. My mom said, she goes, I understand. If you need some time, take your time and go, And I left and I felt good. She didn't kick me out, but we parted ways, right? I bought my first house when in 90 days. I was on this mission. I mean, I'm making this money. I have no excuse not to have a house, right? And so I buy my house. It wasn't even my dream house. I just needed to get in a house. And this is when the market was like hyperinflated, and I bought a house and I lost a ton of money and it was a mess. That next thing you know, 5 years went by. 5 years went by and I had not talked to my mother at all. She remarried and I didn't go to her wedding. My brothers and sisters, this is when MySpace and Facebook were starting to develop. So they had their social media accounts and they would message me almost secretly. They would send, hey, how are you doing? And I'm like, I'm good. And then I would stalk their Facebook pages and because I just wanted to see them growing up, because I felt like the worst part of all of it wasn't my relationship with my parents. It was breaking the news to my little brothers and sisters. Sitting them down in a room, having to explain to them what had just happened. You're explaining a murder to your brothers and sisters.
Did they ever find the murder?
No, it's still cold. It was a cold case situation. I mean, and when you're
dealing, probably never find out.
You're never, and you have to deal with it. You have to just move on, right? And if you do try to move something, you do try to make an investigation, you now put your entire family in jeopardy.
Sure.
So you're caught in a very, very difficult situation. You hope that the universe will take care of it. You hope. And that's all you can do.
Just have to let it go.
I had, when we were doing the classes at the library, remember? Yes. I don't know if you remember, there was a girl who wanted to start a nonprofit for victims of violence, because her mother was murdered and she wanted to start a nonprofit to help the families grieve. Not only that, and find resources to hire private investigators because they felt like the police was not helping them. And especially drug-related, gang-related, cartel-related type crimes. And I remember she was the first person that made me cry in front of a classroom when she was telling me that story. And granted, this is the first time I'm telling this story and giving that much level of detail. I was nowhere near prepared to talk about that kind of stuff, let alone listen to someone else go through the exact same thing. And when she was telling me, and I can see the pain in her voice, I can hear it, I can see all of this. I'm like, how can I help you? How can I help you? How can I help you? And I didn't want to make it too personal, but I also want, how can I help you? Because there are reasons why people do things, and this is your way, and I just felt even more compelled to help because I wanted to help her so that I could benefit from her service. How do you prepare for that conversation with your siblings? Especially now, your siblings at that time, this is 10 years ago. They were 10 years younger. I mean, the smallest, the baby, she was 4 years old. And I was 23 at the time. And I didn't go to school for this, and explaining how things work and answering these questions. Yeah. And they were asking all these details. And I'm like, I don't know if it's appropriate. And I would look at my mom, I'm like, Mom, you do this. This is you, not me. You need to be the mom right now. That's how I felt. Like, I'm one of your kids right now. Yeah. Why am I having to console everybody? It was that anger that just kind of starts to build up and yeah, you start getting really resentful towards your parents, and then your mom, you get really resentful. And then I remember I had bought this little electronic device, and I met Paul. I got married. I remember any movie that has to do with father-son drama or mother-son drama or that kind of story. Oh man, it gets me hard. And then I remember we were sitting on the couch. We had just met. We had just started dating, and the first kind of honeymoon stage of a relationship. We're watching this and we're drinking a ton of wine because we both gained a lot of weight while we were dating because we were drinking and eating a lot. We're watching that and I just break down in tears. And of course the wine had a lot to do with it, but I needed to kind of just release it. I had not cried since the funeral. And I just let this out and I'm embarrassed because I'm crying in front of him. And I said, I think I need to call my mom. And he's like, I'll be right here. I'll be right here if you need to. And I said, okay, call my mom. And I hear her voice. And she goes, hello? And I'm like, hey, Mom. And she just started sobbing. Sobbing.
This had been 5 years.
It had been 5 years since she has heard my voice. I remember the next words that I said to her. And then the rest I don't remember anything else. I said, Mom, I'm ready. I said, I'm ready. And she goes, I'm here. I'm waiting for you. I'm glad that you had your time. It said we picked up right where we left off. And now it's like an unspoken rule that there's no need to bring that up anymore. Let's move on. You had your time. You needed those 5 years. She needed those 5 years. Everyone needed those 5 years.
Right.
And what hurt me the most during that time is not so much where I left off with her. It was that I was the one who caused my little brothers and sisters that pain. I was the one who broke the news to them when Daddy was the light of their eyes, and I was the one who said, now that light has been turned off. And they will always remember me for that. And that's what always has hurt me and carries. That's where my heart is healthy now, and I feel like I'm moving in a great direction. But and I'm doing a lot better now, and I'll share why. But if I had carried any weight, it was because of that. And so now I feel like they're grown up. I feel like, they have questions. We've had a couple of conversations where I've rounded them all up again, very similar to when I broke the news to them, to give them my side of the story, because I was the first witness there. And my mom gave them the rosy version because that was her ex-husband, that was her husband, and that was the father of her children. But now you need to hear from the older brother who was actually there signing paperwork and the one who actually had to do all of this work. And so I felt like I owed them that conversation. And so I had the conversation with them. It was very emotional. It was very painful. I asked them, you guys need to tell me what level of detail do you want me to get in, because I'm willing to answer everything. And they went there. They wanted to know to the point of what it smelled like, to what it looked like, to what it felt like. They wanted to be there themselves, because the crappy part about all of this situation that happened was that they got bullied because of it. There were so many rumors while they were growing up. Your dad is this, your dad is that, and that's why your dad, and that's why your dad, And so the kids never really had tools to defend themselves, and I felt so guilty because of that, that when we had that conversation, it was as if we can all breathe now, and now that they're older, they have their kids now, and now they know the truth, at least my version of the truth. They know they're now getting settled in their careers. My sister's now interning with me when at 11, she was the one who helped me cut the ribbon. And now the fact that she's full circle moment interning with us is very important to me, and it's kind of my way of wrapping them into this big dream of mine, this big role that I'm building, because I am seeing the impact. I am seeing there are things that are changing around me, and it all connects. It all connects, and you should never hide it. You should embrace it and make it to launch you forward. It's a lot of stuff. It's a lot of stuff.
How I know the pain was a driving force for you. At least that's my impression. Mm-hmm. How have you transcended that? How have you, when you hit those low points, and I'm sure there's been a few in your life emotionally, I mean, you've accomplished a tremendous amount given your circumstances. Mm-hmm. How did you transcend that pain when it got difficult?
It got too hard. Well, I think I went through a level of PTSD. A therapist, when we were talking, she says, I don't want to diagnose you, but she goes, can you look up PTSD for me? And I looked up what it meant. And I literally fit the bill exactly, because no son should ever see their father the way they saw their father. No one should ever have to see that.
No.
And when you do see that, your brain is never the same ever again. Because now I got to the point where I couldn't see a pile of laundry on my bed without like getting into a shock or going into anxiety. I couldn't smell certain things without going into anxiety, and so it really affected me very, very hard. So I had to seek therapy. And thanks to that, I got out of, drinking, and I don't drink as much anymore. Every now and then I'll have a little fun, but that's not what it used to be, where it was like every day the purpose was to get drunk,
Yeah.
And
hide the pain.
That was the purpose. Now it's not that. Now it's like, all right, that's good. It tastes good. I don't want it anymore. I can put it down. And I never had an addictive personality, but I knew that I could make choices that were reflective of an addictive personality.
Well, your background is addiction.
Exactly. So, it was in my family. Yeah. So I was like, I'm going to have more power than that. Therapy was really helpful. I had really good friendships, really good friends that I had, people that I can talk to. Obviously, getting in a relationship and then getting married to your best friend was also one of the things. I have a very strong best friend. My friends is a very small circle. The people in my inner circle is very, very small. Tiny. Like I can count them on my hand, how many people are in my inner circle. Everyone else, I say I give them 99% of me. You know, there's always that 1% of sliver that I will never give away because of the experiences that I've had. You know, you have to be guarded up to a certain point. You can trust, you can give, but not all of it, you know, and that's just a way to keep balance. It's a way to keep balance between people you're helping and letting them help themselves, you know. Right. It's the way of keeping balance with my mom. Mom, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. You're not doing it. I'm going to remind you of it, you know, but not doing it for you anymore. It's little brothers. Hey, you dropped out of school. All right. You know what? Now with that time, you want to start a business? All right. You come help me. I'm not going to pay you, but you can come help me and I will show you. So now it's like not giving all the way and allowing them to come forward too. I naturally want to give 100%. And that has hurt me in the past. And now I'm not doing that. Now I give 99%. The other 1% is your responsibility to protect, you know, or to earn, if anything. And so,
why would I contact Compass CBS? Who should contact you?
Who should contact me? You know, I think we're a bilingual business development training center. We're a bilingual for small business owners. I was jokingly telling everybody in front of the room when we were doing our Facebook Live video. I said, you know, I was kind of inspired by, I was driving down the street and I don't know if you've seen the divorce store.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, the divorce store, like, why would anyone go there? But then you naturally said, well, everything you need for your divorce is right there, right? I mean, that's what I thought. And I'm like, I need to have a business store. And so anyone who needs resources for their business, whether it's business plan, business coaching, whether it's business financing for your business, whether it's marketing support, if you want to break into the Spanish-speaking market, I wouldn't say Hispanic, Spanish-speaking market in general, we can help you with that. We have classes, computer classes, anyone who wants to develop their computer skills, business skills. Right now, we're doing it in Spanish. So if there are any bilingual Spanish-speaking professionals or business owners that want to take advantage of our services, they can. I think there's a lot of services in English already that kind of do similar things at what we do, but we're not competing with them because we're bilingual. And because no one is serving a Spanish-speaking market, that's really kind of where we're putting a lot of focus in. Eventually, I would like to see a Chinese version of what we do, you know, the different, you know, languages of Chinese or different, you know, Arabic or, you know, like just a bilingual resource center where everyone and anyone has a shot. It's really what I would love to see. I would love to see these centers pop up all over the world where dreams are being created because there are people who are there to really help them and they're doing it in their language.
That's your vision.
That's my vision.
Conference.
Yeah.
That's a big vision.
That we can be in different countries and doing this service in their language. Mm-hmm.
That's a big vision. Mm-hmm. And it's possible, right?
It is possible.
Someone else did it. Someone else has done something similar.
Yes.
Why couldn't you?
Why couldn't I, right? And I saw this woman at the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce event. They give awards to the first billionaire Latino. Like if you hit the $1 billion mark, they give you an award for that. And so they were giving this award it was called, I forgot what it was called. It was some luncheon, high-powered luncheon or whatever. And we were at the Visa table and none of the Visa representatives were there. That's just how much they care, right? So we're there and they're giving this award to a woman who started in her home an interpreting service where she would translate contracts for companies and she would translate documents, a translating service to small. She started a small business company and eventually became a global empire. And she became the first Latina billionaire in that industry.
Wow.
I thought
I didn't know you could make $1 billion doing that.
Translating services.
That's interesting.
So now you can imagine what her client book looks like. You can imagine what kind of, I'm sure she's got it with science to get to the $1 billion mark, you know, and I thought, oh crap, that's when I really realized I can do that too. And then when I'm meeting all these chamber presidents, it wasn't like immediately that I knew we were the only ones in the entire country doing this, maybe even around the world. In this particular way we're doing it, it wasn't until at the end when we're flying back that I'm looking through all these business cards of chamber presidents that I could reach out to. And every single one of them that I had asked said that, no, there's nothing like that in the way you're doing it in Spanish, bilingual, the way you're connecting bilingualism in business. That's when the light bulb goes off. Man, like the vision can just get that much bigger. I felt like I just went up a mountain and I can see further, kind of like the Lion King, you know, you're like, man, you really can have all this if you want it.
Well, if the trend continues, as I've heard, at least for the past 20 years, that the Latino is going to actually be as big or surpass that of the white other communities, that is certainly possible. Yeah. And you know what I think is interesting about you is, again, you've used the pain. It was a driving force, but you've transcended it in many ways, and it hasn't been a hindrance to you. Whereas some, that would be the reason why I can't do this.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't do this because my dad was a drug addict. I can't do this because my dad was murdered. I can't do this because I had to raise 11 or 10 of my siblings. I can't do this because I was homosexual in the Latino Catholic community. I can't do that. Well, you can.
You can.
And you're the proof of that.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. I mean, I have a couple of brothers who are still trying to figure that out, for themselves as far as transcending pain into opportunity. Thank you for recognizing that. And it's a good feeling now to realize that, you can get ahead. Doesn't matter where you came from.
When you look at yourself, I mean, you don't want to, I guess you want to try and remain humble, but how do you look at yourself now? How do I look where you came to where you are now?
So I like the version that I am today, because I used to be everyone, my family knows me. And this is why I think names have a lot to do with it, with your identity. You have your nickname growing up, right? Your born name, your legal born name. And then you have your nickname. And then you have all the other names that your friends call you, that may not be as the nicest names in the world. And then you have the name that you want your friends to get to know you. And then you have the name that you want your business colleagues or professionals you want your profession. So my name is Edgar Rafael Olivo. Rafael was my dad's name. I have a younger brother now named Rafael. So Rafael is kind of like the main name in the family. Edgar came because my mom and her best friend had children around the same time. They were her best friend. They were pregnant around the same time, and they're both having boys. And they vowed to name their son Edgar. So there's another guy out there that I have no idea who he is, and his name is Edgar, and he has his father's middle name because they agreed to call Edgar. And my mom just liked that name. She's always liked that name. She always felt like it was a doctor's name or a lawyer's name. She always felt like it was a very important name. And I hated it growing up because Edgar Allan Poe and, Eddie Spaghetti and, Mr. Ed. And I got named, and Eddie Spaghetti, your meatballs are ready. I mean, that was what I got every single time. And so Edgar, I'm like, no, I want a cool name. Eddie. So people started calling me Eddie. But then my cousins and my family call me Gary. The Gar and Edgar, G-A-R. Gary, that's kind of the nickname for Edgars in Spanish. And so I was called Gary in my family. So I had my English-speaking friends that called me Eddie. I had my Spanish family and friends call me Gary. And so, who's Gary? Who's Eddie? And next thing you know, and I grew up with all these names. And so it wasn't until I embraced my name, Edgar Rafael Olivo, that I knew Edgar and Eddie are two different people now. Eddie was who went through all that pain. Edgar is the one who's going to open these doors or knock them down. That's who Edgar is. And so when you ask me how do I see myself today, I see myself as Edgar Olivo. And Edgar Olivo decides where he goes, not the past. And now I love my name. I mean, people still chop up the Olivo part. Olive, Oliver, Olivas. It's never right. I mean, I gave this big talk, and you kind of just have to let it go. Just let it go. You're there to give a message. You're there to help. Don't worry about how your name is spelled. At the end of the day, you know your name, right? And so I feel like we give it meaning, right? But I feel like in this case, Edgar gave me meaning. And I have to live up to Edgar's expectations. And I have to live up to Edgar's hopes and dreams and Edgar's potential, because Edgar has a lot of potential. And when you ask me how I see myself now is, oh, shoot, like, man, I can do a lot of things now. Like, I realize that I could barely lift a finger now to get people in a room. Like, to me, that's very powerful. That if I say, oh yeah, I'm going to do an event when I'm working with like chambers or whatever, and hey, I'll organize an event with you guys, I'll just invite my folks. And like the city of Phoenix thing, you would expect that room would have been a lot more full. And every single one of them there was because of me. Right. To be able to do that, I think is, especially to mobilize people, and to be able to gather them, to give them something that's going to benefit them. I think that is a very powerful ability, and I respect it, and I treasure it, because I think being an instructor, I'm an educator now, being in front of a room, when you are there to educate, you are there to educate, you are there to help, you are a servant of the student, not the other way around. And I find that there are people who don't understand that. I mean, I remember the guy who got the training job after I got the gaming job. Oh my God, I remember I would like nitpick every little thing that he would do, that he was doing wrong, because he would go out and party with the employees and then want to train them. And then I just remember that the trainer is such a
responsibility, you know, that if you're teaching these things, you need to be walking the talk. You need to be the example of that. And so in a way, being a trainer puts me in check. You know, being a trainer, being a business development trainer, that puts me in check. If I'm talking about ethics, if I'm talking about morals and values, and I'm talking about vision, mission, and all these other things, all these, you know, things that go along with business, I better be walking the talk. And so in a sense, I've created a business, my own parent, if you may, that is helping me grow up in this world. Because these are ethical practices, they're ethical beliefs. I have to live up to that. And I feel like when your business now becomes your boss in that regard, where your brand now tells you the way you need to behave, I think you've done something right.
Well, that's great. I really appreciate you sharing everything you've shared today.
Thank you.
As I mentioned before, and I've done this, I've used my past as my excuse. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't have to be. Your past is your past. There's a great thing the Buddha talked about, said, if you want to understand where you were or what happened, look at yourself today. Mm-hmm. If you want to know where you're going to be in the future, look at yourself today. Mm-hmm. Meaning, today is it. Mm-hmm. Now is it. Mm-hmm. There's no other time. The past doesn't exist. The future doesn't exist. It's only now. What are you doing now?
Yeah. What did I learn to do something now?
Right. Now. That's all we ever have is now.
It is. And that's exactly what I just told my sister before I came to the podcast. I said, don't worry about tomorrow. Don't worry about yesterday. What are we doing right now?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you. We'll end it with that. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.